Yeah. Oh, that's better. Who are you? Who are you? Not who the. Yeah,
that's us just going live, guys. So whenever you're ready, away you go.
Okay.
Good luck.
Good evening and welcome from Table Tennis Scotland. My guest tonight will be joining us for the third time. First, he came on as a player, and secondly, as a coach and a commentator. And tonight, Donald Parker will be joining us as a parent. And it's a parent to two international sons and daughters, Katie and Adam. And we'll be learning all about Katie and Adam and how they got on in sport and how Donald managed that. And we'd also be looking at the fact that they also played two different sports as well. My right-hand person tonight is Elisa Khalid. Elisa, who is training to be a surgeon during the day, but is a table tennis player during the afternoon and the evening, and is a Scottish international at junior and senior level. So it's welcome to Elisa again, and welcome to Don. Right, Don, two children, and we're going to sort of start as they're doing on television now, where they turn the clock back and then they have fast forwards and everything else. And son Adam, England are playing a test match and he's called onto the field. Tell us all about it.
Well, before we start, Dave, I just want to make a point. I'm really happy to be here this evening. And I think I should start by congratulating Table Tennis Scotland. I mean, I'm not sure exactly, this is probably your 20th Zoomcast in a fairly short period. And I've tuned into quite a few and they've been absolutely excellent. So well done on keeping that going. I think tonight is a subject that may not appeal to everybody, but to those parents and the children, the players who can remember the input of the parents, hopefully they'll find it fairly interesting. But just to start by saying there's no one answer. Every child's different, every parent's are different, and maybe we'll get a chance to look at some relationships that work and some that perhaps didn't work. So just going back to your opening comment about Adam, Adam was a pretty good table tennis player. He got to the final of the national under 12s, I think it was, obviously when he was a youngster. But then, of course, the battles commenced with his sister, little sister, and I think that's an important point. And little sister beat him a few times at the age of 12, 13. And for a mature young boy, losing to your sister at table tennis didn't go down too well. And if anything, he wasn't quite as keen as Katie. And we've always felt the children should do what they enjoy. And Adam was really enjoying cricket. So he sort of pursued his cricket. He ended up getting a contract with the MCC as a young cricketer, lived down at Lords for 3 years, played in Australia for 3 seasons. Unfortunately, well, I say unfortunately, he didn't quite make it into first-class cricket, but he had a fabulous time. And when England play test matches, the first day of a test match, the 12th man stays. But after that first day, the 12th man goes back to his county. And then the MCC young cricketers, of which Adam was part of, would provide one substitute fielder. And Adam often got nominated because he was a half-decent fielder. And his first appearance on the pitch for England as 12th man was in your hometown, Dave. He was in Nottingham at Trent Bridge. And I got a quick phone call from a friend saying, Adam's just come on. Nasser Hussain had broken his finger or got a very bad finger injury fielding in the slips. And Adam came on looking very sheepish. And of course, Saturday night at a test match, third day, everybody's in fancy dress. Everybody's had a fairly serious drinking has gone on. And I'll never forget when I turned on, Adam was running down to third man and the camera was on him. And there must have been a few thousand lads there enjoying themselves, having a great day, shouting, "Who are you? Who are you?" as Adam came down. And I'm sure he was thinking, for heaven's sake, I don't want a catch coming my way. So, yeah, Adam wasn't actually an international player. Did very well. He was a good player, but didn't actually make it as a first-class cricketer, but played at a high level and pro'd in the leagues around the north of England. So he's really enjoyed the cricket that he has played.
And he's still playing?
Well, he's now got two young boys who love sport and are getting involved in sport. And the problem with cricket, of course, is when you play at a reasonable level, you know, it can involve Saturday, Sunday, and a bank holiday Monday. He's working. So, no, he's not playing it. He's sort of focusing on his two young boys. And perhaps when they start playing cricket or whatever sport, Adam will probably get back involved, I'm sure.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, well, we've titled this Nappies to Nationals. Katie was born first.
No, Adam was born first.
Oh, my apologies. Adam was born first. What age did he show an interest in sport?
Well, I think this is a really good point to start this, you know, Nappies to, you know, international, or, you know, I think as a parent, you've got to try and give your kids the opportunity to see where. I think it's important for a youngster to have interests out. You know, obviously they've got the school, they've got the friends and family, but then you've got music, you know, the arts, you've got sport, and we try to be very open from that point of view. I am not a musician. I never. But, you know, we bought a piano and we encouraged them. So we wanted them to do something that they enjoyed doing. And obviously there are table tennis bats in our house that you know, Mother Jill, European champion at table tennis. So I guess it's not surprising that you know, they took up an interest in it. And so Adam probably started playing at the age of 6, 7, something like that. And Katie about the same time. And Katie's 13 months younger. So Katie started at 5 or 6. And I remember turning a cabinet over so she could actually, because she was quite small, Katie, as a young girl. And we used to stand her on the cabinet so she could, and you'll remember, Dave, in our coaching days, we always used to encourage top of the bounce, you know, get people into the habit of taking the ball, first point of contact at the top of the bounce. She couldn't hit it at the top of the bounce. She was too small. But by standing her on this cabinet that we put on the floor, she was able to take it at the top of the bounce when she was 5 or 6. And that actually worked well.
Yeah. And do you think having Adam, I want to say, a role model, the older sibling, that encouraged her, or?
It's a good point. And I know families have got, you know, brothers and sisters who are very competitive. I think it did help her. I'm not sure it helped Adam too much, particularly when he got to the point where Katie beat him a few times. But yeah, no, I think it did. And obviously they could practice together as well. Yeah. And so she was actually practicing with somebody who was a little bit better than her. Adam was the talented one. You know, he even academically found things quite comfortable. Katie was the grafter. Katie grafted at her table tennis, grafted at her schoolwork, did well, but it was, you know, she wasn't a natural. She wasn't as a natural as Adam was, and that's interesting from a parental point of view. When one of your youngsters is working harder than the other one.
Yeah, I mean, I said on the Zoomcast before, Don, you know, I'm just copying somebody else when he said maybe we should go motivational spotting rather than talent spotting, because talent will come and go where motivation tends to stay. I'm actually going to, because we've covered quite a bit, I'm just going to bring in Elisa. Is there anything you want to pick up or ask Don early on the two nappy playing table tennis players?
I was just wondering, how did you manage to keep young children motivated to keep playing table tennis?
Yeah, no, I always felt, Elisa, the most important thing for any young player, but you know, particularly when it was my son and my daughter, was that they enjoy it. And therefore, when we went to, you know, we started playing in the local league, and then obviously you go on to tournaments, and it was just a question of, you know, winning has to become, you know, you always have to play to win, but if you lose, you know, it's not a big issue. You can learn more when you actually lose. And I think it's somehow overcoming that disappointment of losing, making sure that the players, that the youngsters enjoy playing. And I think then when you're actually advising them as well, or you're there as a parent, I think the worst thing a parent can do, and it's difficult because as a parent, you want the youngsters to do really well. And if they make an error, you know, the temptation as a parent is to go, oh no, and then the child sees that and suddenly they get upset because they've upset. And I think it's a case of smiling when you're there as a parent and you're coaching in the corner. And then even when they go for a shot and they miss it, if it's the right shot to go for, I would always encourage them. And I used to get a lot of strange looks when Katie was playing in tournaments as a youngster. And I'd be saying, well done, Katie, well done. And she's lost the point. But she'd done the right thing. And of course, in terms of developing a player to come through, it's so important to develop the right habits. So I think encouragement, I think even if they lose points, not necessarily, you know, being positive about the way they lose points, and then making sure they enjoy it. They actually enjoy playing. I mean, just a quick story. Katie got to the semi-final of the under 12s in Milton Keynes, and she was playing this young girl. And I'm there just wanting her to enjoy it, to relax, to smile, to do her best. And she's playing this young girl, and I'm the coach, I'm sat in the corner, and she loses the first game, 21-15 or whatever it was. And she comes over to me, and it's a long time ago, but that night on telly, we're in Milton Keynes, and I live in Preston. I've brought Katie down to the tournament. England were playing Samoa in the quarter-final of the World Cup at rugby. And when Katie came off to me for advice, and I was the England coach at the same time, but I'm now with my daughter in the under 12s. And I said to her, I said, Kate, don't worry if you lose. I'll get home. We'll be home in time to watch the Rugby World Cup quarter-final. Well, Katie then says to me, oh, Dad, I'm going to beat her now. And Katie did go back, and she was a bit of a grin on her face, and she won that, and she won the third game, and she's in the final. And sort of what sort of made me worried slightly is the coach and the father of the young girl she'd beaten, and she was a very good player, this young girl. They came over to me and shook my hand, because coaches now shake hands at the end.
Yeah.
You know, and so I shook hands, and they said, Don, what a good guy. I said, it was a wonderful game. I said, your daughter played fantastic. It's a pity they both couldn't win. They said, do you mind us asking, what advice did you give Katie? And I think it's so important that the youngsters learn to think for themselves as well. Yeah. So there was actually a little bit of method in my madness. I didn't want Katie to be coming over to me thinking, my dad will tell me how to win. Well, yeah, I'll give her a bit of advice, but I want her to think about what she's got to do as well. So I think one of the key things is make it fun, just enjoy it, and at the same time be clever in the way you push them in the right direction as well.
And can I just say, were they doing any other sports at that time, Don? Were they?
Oh, sorry, Dave.
Were they playing any other sports around?
Yes, they were. I mean, again, I think that's a really interesting question. As a parent, you have a talented youngster at sports, but I think to play other sports is crucial. I think the difficult question is, when do you specialise? When do you start? And then, Alicia, you must have put an enormous amount of time into your career in to become a surgeon. And it's balancing life, isn't it? That's a real challenge. So I think in the early stages, for youngsters to play, not a lot of sports, but to get involved in many activities is really healthy. I think the tough question is, when do you start specialising? So now I'm going through this next stage of my life. I'm a granddad. I've got 5 grandchildren, and 2 of the Darcy's 9, and she's a very keen netball player, doing quite well at netball, but wants to play other sports as well. But netball seems to be what she's the best at. And then Teddy loves his golf, but he plays a bit of football. And I think it's important they play those sports. But then, when do you specialise? And also, how do you balance it with your academic career? Because that's so important as well. And if I'm honest, Katie got to the point you know, when she became England's senior number one, junior number one, England's senior number one, and played in the Chinese National League, was going over to China to play. And then she decided she couldn't beat the Chinese, were too good for her. And the effort for her to get into a position where she could actually earn a living playing table tennis, it was just so unlikely, because as we know, the Chinese women are so strong. You know, she made the decision to go to university, get a degree behind her, and then she would have a career. And she came back into table tennis and was working for Table Tennis England as one of the national coaches. She's now got three children, and is a full-time mother at this point in time to 3 young kids. So yeah, no, it's no. So the next question would be, Dave, when do you specialise? And I think the thing about table tennis that's really interesting, well, not interesting, it's a fact, it's a really difficult sport to play, in my opinion. And when you compare it to some sports, you know, and you've got to be so careful here, because I don't want to be insulting other sports, but the fact that you can start rowing or cycling and within 2-3 years win a gold medal at the Olympics, it's because the sport is it's physically based. And I've got nothing but the utmost admiration for those people who can dedicate themselves to that level of fitness and then go on to win gold medals. Steve Redgrave, 5 gold medals. Wow, unbelievable. But table tennis, you need to have at least, well, I don't know, Dave, I don't know what you think, Elisa, but I would have thought from starting playing table tennis, it's possibly getting a bit younger now. We've got the young boy from Japan, Harimoto. We've got some young Japanese players, a young Korean girl that I saw recently in Portugal at the Olympic qualification tournament for the team. Amazed me. And they're winning big tournaments at 16, but they've started playing at 5 and 6. So it's at least 10 years to become a top-class table tennis players. Some sports, it's much shorter. And of course, rowing's a sport, for example, you could take up at university and then go on to win a gold medal. And there are countless examples, not countless, but there are numerous examples of athletes who've gone to university, started rowing, and gone on to win a gold medal. I think if you start table tennis at 18, when you go to university, you've got no chance. I would suggest today to be a top-class table tennis player and earn a living from table tennis. And I know we're not talking about just that, we're talking about enjoying the sport and being good at it. But if you want to earn a living at table tennis, I think you need to be, one of the top players in Europe when you're 14, a cadet, 14, 15. And if you look at the players who've gone on to make it, they were the best. They were the top in the continent, in Europe, when they were 14, 15. But that's just my opinion, Dave, Elisa. So it's a tough sport. It's a tough sport.
I think the average world, I mean, obviously Bengtsson won it at 17 and Kono won it at 35. So you've always got the extremes. But I think the studies suggest you're about 27 when you hit your peak, and therefore you've probably been playing 15 years.
Yeah. No, that is interesting, isn't it? And and Katie just made the decision that when she was 29, she went to university a couple of years later, because she was playing table tennis, but then just felt to get into the top 50 in the world, top 30 in the world, was too tough for her. And we're very pleased. Jill and I were really pleased with the decision. I mean, that's interesting. I just mentioned Jill's name there. Jill was European champion. But it's very interesting, in the early days when Katie was little and Adam was little, Jill got really nervous coaching them. And Jill said, no, you can coach. When I say coaching them, there's so many aspects of coaching, isn't there? There's the coach in the training hall. There's the coach at the tournament, who sits down there and looks super cool and gives the advice during the game. Jill really struggled with that because she just got too nervous when her children were playing. And there was I thinking, Jill, European champion, she just relish it when her kids, but no, Jill just got a bit too nervous. So that was quite interesting. I just really enjoyed it because I just tried to make sure that Katie and Adam, when he was playing table tennis, just enjoyed it and had a good time playing. And it was interesting, Adam, with his cricket. I could say to Adam, yeah, how did you, he was well, he was an all-rounder, but I'd say, how did you bat today, Adam? And he'd say, oh, I batted well. I said, how many runs did you get? And he'd say 23. And then next week, he'd say, no, I batted well, Dad. And how many runs did you get? 84. And it wasn't how many runs he got that he was worried about. It's how well he actually played. Because sometimes in cricket, you just get an unbelievable ball that gets you out, but you were actually in good. And I think it's thinking about, the task as opposed to the outcome, and not getting too focused, i.e. on whether you win or lose. You can lose and play really well. Well, celebrate that, enjoy that, as long as you've done your best.
And Elise, have we picked up a question from YouTube?
Yeah, so I think Kelly Grudge has asked, is it a good idea to always coach your own kids, or is it sometimes better to ask someone outside the family to coach them?
Well, that's a great question. And you can answer this, Elise, after I've said something, because I know your dad played and you've got brothers and sisters who play. There are some examples of the parent-child where it's worked really well. I left school and I went to Loughborough. My dad thought it'd be a good idea if I was a PE teacher. So I went to Loughborough College, and there were some great athletes there across different sports. But probably the best known athlete in my year was Sebastian Coe, Seb Coe. And of course, he went on to win Olympic gold medals, now president of the IAAF. But Seb's father was his coach. So there was an example in athletics where the father-son worked incredibly well. In table tennis, a lot of people will remember Carl Preen. Oh, there we go. Dave's got his Seb Coe book. And his father, Peter Coe. Peter Coe, Dave, his father, came to watch England play Poland in a European League match at Sheffield when I was the coach of the England team. I said to somebody, I'd love to meet him. And he came over and we shook hands and we had a chat. And I said, I'd been at university at the same time as his son. And his knowledge on table tennis and sport was phenomenal. He just studied pressure and how different people in different sports. And he'd obviously worked closely with his son. In table tennis, I was just talking about Carl Preen and his dad. A lot of people thought that was, Carl would get very upset sometimes or appear to get upset. But that worked unbelievably well. So I don't think there's a correct answer to the question, and I think the question is a great question. And I would have to come down and say I think it depends on the individuals. I'm watching my grandkids, and they're perhaps not quite as receptive to me. Now they probably think, who's the old bloke telling me what to do on the football pitch? So but.
I think the harder question, Don, is probably recognising whether you are or you are not the best person too.
Yeah.
I mean,
I guess Andy Murray, being the Scottish, superstar tennis, it just appears to me that Mum played a massive role in getting Andy to a certain level. And again, funny enough, I've met Andy Murray once in Rio at the Olympics and spoke to him briefly, but obviously in no detail. It just seems to me Mum got him playing to a good level, but then Mum was quite happy for him to work with, coaches at the appropriate level to take him on to the next stage. And I think that's one of the problems sometimes. Sometimes coaches are reluctant to pass athletes, to pass, whether it's table tennis, badminton, or whatever, to actually pass them on. Whereas I think if it's a parent, as you've said, I think a parent only wants the best for the kid. Yeah. So they will, when they think it appropriate, when it's, they will pass the player on, and somebody else then will take on the role as they get to a different level. So what do you think, Elisa? Did your dad coach you?
Yeah, my dad's the one that taught me how to play, and he still coaches me to this day. I think it's quite good because you have that sort of understanding with your parent that like another coach probably wouldn't have. Like they know you, who you are and what you like, and if the match is going kind of a bad way, they know how to bring you out of it. from my experience. I've always quite liked it. I get where it can be sometimes quite a lot of pressure where you're trying to make your parents kind of proud of you. But yeah, I've had good experiences.
Good. But also, and I'd like to think if you ask my daughter, she'd say exactly the same as you, Elisa. But I'm sure there are, well, we've seen cases, haven't we, where, you know, it doesn't work as well. So it's a great question, but yeah, I think it depends on the individual's concern.
Yeah. It's this ability to recognise whether you are or whether you're not the right person. I mean, if you take Mark Lundberg, who normally is on this show, but he can't make it this week. His dad played local league, so he understood table tennis. But and he got Gavin involved in table tennis, Gavin Rumgay. He got Gillian Edwards, four-time Scottish champion, I think, Gillian, and some very good players. But very early on, he passed them on, but remained the mentor. So he was the one that brought in Alison Bro up to coach, or Peter McQueen, or whoever, you know. But so his role as a parent was a facilitator, and he virtually never coached, even though he was quite capable of coaching. So, you know, it's again a different angle of again. And as you were saying about Jill, Sarah Hurry's dad, Ken Hurry, he was the treasurer for Scottish table tennis for many years. He had a very senior position at Scottish Amicable, top man. Somebody washed his car every day, opened the doors for him. And he would go and to every tournament Sarah played and sit outside, wouldn't even come in the hall. He'd be pacing up and down outside, whether it was China or whatever. So not easy.
No, but Dave, I think that's a great point that you make, because I think there were quite a few players, if you said to them, who looks after you, then the answer would be there's somebody looking after them when they're on the table playing, but there's a mentor in the background who is often a parent. So that's the person, you know, if something's gone wrong, or, you know, how am I getting to this tournament? What tournaments am I playing in? Not the actual technical side of playing a game. Then I think you're right. They're the facilitator, the mentor, the taxi driver. And I think sometimes there are two key people, the coach and the facilitator. And I think often parents slip into the facilitator, you know, and let somebody else then take over on the coaching side. Or, you know, in my case with Katie, I tended to stick around a while. But then, see, I was not fortunate. The period of time I'm talking about with Katie was lottery funding, when table tennis got an enormous amount of money from the lottery kicked in the early 90s. So Katie went to live in Nottingham. And funny enough, Dave, you'll find this amusing. I'm watching telly with Katie the other day, and Tottenham Hotspur were playing Newcastle 1-0.
VAR.
She said, I know him. He was at home Pierpont with me. I used to play table tennis. These football lads from the Forest Academy used to come in to play, and Katie used to practice with one lad in particular. And she said, that's him. And he was on the commentary team. Dawson. Is it Dawson? He used to play for... He started at Forest. That's the one, Michael. Yeah. So Katie said he could play. He's a good player. So there you are. At least one of the Forest players can play table tennis. They can't play football at the moment, Dave.
They certainly can't. Yeah. Okay. And again, another example. Like Colin Dalglish is our national men's champion, and he is the British champion as well. And his paternal coach is Lindsay Muir. Now, Lindsay's a very good Division 1 player in Edinburgh. He's brought on lots of good players, but he's backed off with Colin once Colin got to a certain standard, but he still provides massive support for Colin, but not in the corner, you know. So I think that's just brilliant. His own Gordon, who Elisa knows is one of our selectors and one of our top coaches. Again, you know, doing a fantastic job, but he never wants to be on the front row taking the applaudits. He wants to kind of sit on the back seat. And so we've got lots of good examples of I mean, I'm not saying there's a bad, trouble is if you say there's a good example, people might think, oh, well, it must mean that because I'm on the front row, then that must be a bad example. But no, I'm saying there's different examples.
Yeah. No, exactly.
Elisa, over to you.
And so you said you coached your children. Have you always coached them, or did they ever have another coach?
I tended to work with them. We actually had a table at home, and that was so helpful. So we didn't have to travel anywhere to practice. And in fact, when they first started to play in the local league, we played local league matches at home. And because, as you know, they both played when they were at primary school, and local league matches can finish quite late. So they could literally, when they were playing home games, as soon as they finished, they could be in bed for 10 o'clock, 9:30. Bearing in mind, they were still 8 or 9, 10 going to primary school. But then I guess, Adam drifted away and got interested in his cricket. Rugby played as well. But Katie then sort of got involved on the England's, going on England training camps. And the England coaches probably took over Katie's development from the age of about 13, 14. And I would say I then fell into the bracket that Dave was just describing as a facilitator. So I would say I was involved with the two children in those early formative years between 6 to 11, 12, and then 13. And then, and Adam, as I say, drifted away and Katie carried on playing. Just a funny story about, so Katie really beating Adam started his cricket career and finished his table tennis career in a sense. We joke about that now at family gets-togethers, how Katie, and then they played a match one night in our house, in the table tennis room, as we called it. And there's a young boy playing for the opposition. It was actually Deepdale, the same team, but it was Deepdale D, and Katie and Adam were in Deepdale F. This is in the years when there were like 12 divisions in Preston. And this young boy played, very tall boy, not too, Katie beat him, and then Adam beat him. And I got talking to him, and he was very shy, but he told me he played cricket was his main sport. And I asked him, who did he play for? And he said, I play for St Anne's, and St Anne's is a very strong cricket club in my area. And then by coincidence, about 4 weeks later, I get a phone call. Some people listening may remember a player called Nigel Hallows, who came from Lancashire. He played for Lancashire and was a good friend of mine, but he was a very good wicket keeper and played for Lancashire Seconds at cricket, played for Little Lever. And he said, Don, I'm playing near you. I'm playing against St Anne's. So I thought, well, I'll go and watch you. And I turned up at half time, and St Anne's had fielded, and they got Little Lever all out for 120. And I'm sat there, and Nigel comes over. I've arrived half time, and Lytham, St Anne's are chasing 120. And he said, they won't get it done. It's not the best track. We think we've got them beat with 120. And I looked, and it's this young lad who'd been playing table tennis at our house. He's coming out, and I couldn't believe it. He's opening the batting for St Anne's first team, and he hit 80 off the first 10 overs, this young lad. And of course, it was Andrew Flintoff, who's become a household name. And if you see Andrew Flintoff, ask him who ruined his table tennis career, because I've met him a few times, and he always says, your daughter ruined my table tennis career. Yeah. So she's forced Adam into cricket, away from his table, so she's ruined too. But Andrew Flintoff, sort of a household name, who's a big TV personality now.
Yeah. Okay, Elisa, I'm going to stick with you again.
So when Katie moved on to getting coached from English coaches, did you end up having any kind of disagreements with what they were coaching her versus to what you coached, or did everything kind of fall into place quite well?
No, that's an excellent question. I think, you know, I guess quite a few of the coaches that had worked with me, so I knew them all pretty well. So I guess from my point of view, I was at a slight advantage because I could ring them anytime and chat things through. And I'd always go and pick Katie up from a training camp and have lunch with them or dinner with them, and we'd chat. So we didn't really have any issues from that point of view. But I do know that is a real challenge, isn't it? When players go on national weekends or national camps, you know, are they being told the same thing as they're being told, you know, in the club as when they go on a national, and then they go back and they're not what? And I think the answer to that, Elisa, to be honest, is communication. You know, the better the communication can be. And often, I know we're Zooming now, but I you know, face-to-face conversations and good communications to me are crucial. And if there's a disagreement, then the player shouldn't be involved in that disagreement. That needs to be the two, you know, the national coach and the home coach actually sorting that out. Because what you don't want is, you know, different things happening, you know, and a conflict. So the player's then just not sure, you know, do I topspin a long push or do I drive along, you know, and what do I do? Do I push it back or do I topspin it back? And everyone's got to be singing from the same hymn sheet. So I think your question is so important. And I would say the answer is communication and agreeing the programs that we're working on. You know, there's a young boy who I practice with now, and I'm not his coach, far from it. And I just practice with him, and his sister, and Jill will come down, and my sister, who was a good player, and we just have a training session. But he's now involved with the England setup, and I'll speak to Alan Cook. So I'm practicing with him tomorrow night, probably for about, I practice for as long as my legs can stand up, and it's about an hour and a half. And then Jill comes and plays a bit long. But I'll be practicing with him, not coaching him, but Alan Cook said to me, look, Don, I just think he needs to, so I'll set the practices up to, you know, to try and improve him in the areas. I'm not going to tell him how to move his feet or how to play a shot. That's up to the coaches. But I'll make sure, just by speaking to Cookie, going back, my advantage is I've known Cookie since he was 14, Alan Cook. So, you know, that just makes sure tomorrow night I know I'll be doing the right practices with the young lad, that will hopefully, you know, the sort of things that Cookie would want him to do. But yeah, I do know there are issues. I mean, the thing is, in England at this point in time, I'm now on the board of Table Tennis England, which is really interesting, and I'm enjoying it. And there's a lot of highly motivated people doing their best for table tennis. And we've got these squads now, and everybody seems to be very pleased with what's happening at squad level. But the interesting thing is the youngsters only spend 20, 30 days training in their squads. So that means there's another 300 days when they're training at home. And it's so important that those 30 days are joined up to those 300 days, because that's what we're up against. We're up against Germany, Sweden, France, where they have clubs where, you know, they have full-time coaches, so they're consistently doing the same things. I think, you know, we can compete in the UK, in England, Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland, but we do need that communication between what goes on at national level and what goes on back home. And indeed, in some cases, it's not, we haven't got the club structure. So sometimes back home, you know, it's down a hall with just one table with the local coach and a local player. But we just need to make sure we have that, you know, continuation. It's a challenge, but I think and I hope we can be up to it.
Yeah, I think sometimes I was having a chat with Ken Muir, who you know really well, Don, and Ken was saying that one of his players came back from an England camp, and the player thought he was being taught different things, but it was actually being taught exactly the same thing. But I'm just going to make this up. Ken was emphasising the wrist, and the England coach was emphasising the shoulder. So it was exactly the same. There was, but the emphasis was different, and sometimes that, you know, so the communication's really important. But also, players have got to think for themselves, because during their career, they'll get good advice and they'll get bad advice. Most of it will be neutral advice, I think. And they have to have the ability to think, yeah, I don't think I'll step onto the M4. That's not a very good idea. Do you know what I mean? They have to be self-sufficient as well. So taking all this information and work out what's good for you. But yeah, Elisa.
So Dave, can I just say something on that? Because I think it's such an important point. And it's interesting because it's topical. Since I've been on the board of Table Tennis England, one of the first things that happened is the performance team, and it was quite controversial, and communications arguably could have been a little bit better. But basically, the performance team decided to have this tournament, a fairly prestigious tournament, but a one-off tournament with no coaching.
Yeah,
and of course, what happened is a lot of coaches, didn't know why. Then there was no, as I say, communications could have been better. So there's a little bit of controversy about this, which I found really interesting. And going back when I was the coach to the England team, so we're going back to the late 70s and 80s, sort of 40 years ago. But we did that at one of our, I think, the Masters, the junior Masters, and we said no coaching. And it was for the very reason you just said, Dave. It was to make the players, think more about, and it's not just a case of what happens at that weekend. It all hopefully stresses to the players that they need to start to think for themselves. And then you make them think for themselves in a one-off tournament. And hopefully you make them mentally tougher, because, at the end of the day, I know coaching is changed now, hasn't it? Because you can give advice during the match. Whereas going back to then, you could only give advice in between games, and you got told off, where you could get the red card, couldn't you, and get sent off if you were coaching. But no, I totally agree. And it was interesting in England, there was quite a debate recently. There was quite a bit in social media, debating this. But, I believe as a one-off, I'm not saying every tournament, far from it, but as a one-off tournament, I think it was, it happened prior to me coming on the board. But anyway, I was in favour of it. And I've sort of been, I won't say I've been very vocal on that, but I do think it's really important that kids think for themselves.
Yeah, and I think, as I've said on the Zoomcast before, I think some tournaments they should have coaches, and other tournaments they should think for themselves. Because one of the biggest surprises I ever had at table tennis was when I first captained England with you, Don, in Germany. And I kind of had this vision of I'll turn up at this stadium and there's going to be 40,000 people, and the England team's going to walk out, to fanfares, and the German team's going to walk out. Anyway, the tournament started at 9 o'clock. There's nobody there. The hall was absolutely empty, and there was less of an atmosphere than a local league match. And I was coaching one player, you was coaching another. 4 of them were uncoached. So they've got to think for themselves. And that became typical. You took a team of 4 or 5 players to a tournament, and there'd be 2 or 3 of them. So they have to think for themselves. So if they just get used to it a little bit and regard the coach as if they've got a coach or somebody to bounce ideas on, then that becomes a bonus rather than something they have to have. Lisa, anything from, we've got a press announcement to make. We're just going to break for a news flash. And the news flash is the World Championships of 2023 have been awarded to South Africa. And I'm just going to ask Don to fill in the details there.
Yeah, no, it was the AGM of the ITTF, albeit a virtual AGM today. But yeah, no, the 70% of the votes went in favour of Durban versus Dusseldorf, and I think that's a really interesting vote because Dusseldorf is Germany. We all know that they will stage a fantastic World Championships, wonderful. The outside courts will be wonderful, and there'll be 10,000 people there every day. I was in Dusseldorf recently. Well, 6 years ago, 4 years ago for the World Championships, and it was just packed every day. It's just a wonderful atmosphere. And then you've got. So, do we go back to safe hands, or do we take a chance and do we go to South Africa? The World Championships have been in Africa only once. In 1939, and an Englishman was the world champion, although I think he was born in Austria. Richard Bergman won the World Championships in 1939 in Cairo. So we've never been back to Africa, and we've never, ever been to South Africa. So there's part of me that thought, hang on, the safest bet is Dusseldorf. Say it again, Dave.
I said, I almost went to South Africa.
You did? That's a good story. Let's tell that story in a second. Versus, and yeah, so my heart told me I would vote for South Africa. My head told me that I should vote for. I didn't vote, by the way, but my head told me the players, the top players in the world, Dusseldorf was a safer place for them to be. What do you think, Elise? If you make the Worlds in 2023, would you prefer Durban in South Africa or Dusseldorf in Germany?
I know Dusseldorf is quite a good atmosphere to be in. I played a tournament a few times there when I was younger and really enjoyed it, and it's quite popular there as well. Never been to South Africa, so I can't say if I'd enjoy it or not, but I'm sure they'll do a good job of it as well.
Yeah. Of course, the Commonwealth are celebrating, and we are, of course, part of the Commonwealth. We have 10 countries in Europe are in the Commonwealth. England, Scotland, Northern Ireland, Wales, Jersey, Guernsey, the Isle of Man, Gibraltar, Malta, and Cyprus. So, there'll be 10 Commonwealth countries that will be pleased it's gone to a member of the Commonwealth family, South Africa. I was involved with Commonwealth Games. I used to be the sports director of Commonwealth Games, and I was sent to look at India and to look at Hamilton in Canada, which is where the first ever Commonwealth Games, and do an assessment for the Games in 2010. And I actually came down, and it caused me not a lot of sleepless nights, but it was the same debate. Safe hands in Canada, and the Games have never been to India. We went for India, and I was in India just before the Games were about to start. I thought, they're not going to happen. We had a bridge collapse. We had the roof of a stadium collapse. It looked like, and I just thought, it's terrible. And yet the Games happened. They were wonderful. And you talk to the athletes now, a lot of them will say, Delhi's the best Games I've ever been to, because it was culturally somewhere they'd never been to before, as you just said, Elisa, and culturally it was something they'd never experienced before. So I'm hoping South Africa will fall into that bracket, that they'll stage a great Games. And we don't want the Games going China, Germany, the odd trip to Sweden, and then South Korea, and then we're back to Germany. So it's great to bring in, it's great to extend the family. But yeah, so 2023, keep those. Jill and I are definitely going to go. We will go as spectators, as commentators. We will be in Durban, because I think it's a little bit of history for the game. And I'll certainly like to be part of it in some capacity, albeit a spectator. We'll be there. So.
Right, Elise, did I see spot something from YouTube?
Yeah, so Kelly Grudge asked another question. So that's from both me and Dawn. Who is the current family champion in both the Parker and Khaled households? Do you have a handicap system or just play from 0-0? I'll let you answer that first, Dawn.
Okay, well, I suddenly realised in my household that Jill was European champion and an MBE, and currently has won the English close 7 times. So I have to slip down the ranking list to Jill. And then Katie, of course, was England number 1 senior. So I'm now down to number 3 in the house. And then my sister, who is 10 years younger than me, was European junior gold medalist. She won the men's doubles. She won the women's doubles. Here's Jill now. And she won the European youth gold medal. So I'm afraid I then decided coaching is for me. I slid down to number 4 in my own house. So I hope you do better, Elise, in your analysis.
Well, in my house, I rank number 9. Number 8 is the ironing board, and I'm number 9 in my household. Elisa, and you? Who's the champ?
I'd probably say my younger brother Zed. He's probably, yeah, he went through kind of when he was maturing, he started getting a lot of power into his shots and took over, I'd say. Yeah. Got another younger brother, Ryan. He's coming up as well, so not long till he starts beating everyone as well.
What about Dad? Can Dad beat you?
Well, at the moment, when I play a game, I do tend to beat him, but
okay, good, go for it.
He's got a good game on him, so you never know. He could pull out tricks.
Elisa, any more on YouTube, or it's your question?
No, that's all for YouTube.
Right, okay, I'll just ask the role of the parent. I've got taxi driver, bank roller, mentor, coach, and the last one, which I think is really important, visionary. Thinking, where are your children going to end up in 10 or 15 years' time? So how did you see your roles there? Taxi driver, bank roller, mentor, coach, visionary, bit of all of them?
I think it's a bit of all of them, isn't it, Dave? And I think that last one, the visionary one, is, I'm not sure if, I like the word visionary, but we just talk about Adam, with he came back from Australia after 3 years of playing cricket in Australia and in England. And he then said to us, look, I'm just not quite good enough to make it as a first-class cricketer. He backed off cricket, and then he completely threw himself into his professional career, into finance, and he's done really well. And from our point of view as mum and dad, I think that was great for us, that he made this, and then he applied the dedication that he'd had to his career. And likewise with Katie, she discussed, particularly with Jill, but also with me, what she has to do to become, top 30 in the world, and the Chinese are just too good, and I want to go to university, then, we would always support them in those. And I think that's the visionary bit, isn't it? And when if you're clever and subtle as a parent, you can gently point in the right direction. And we just felt for both of them that was the right direction. I had Matthew Said, Dave, you'll know Matthew well from Reading, and Matthew Said didn't do great with his GCSEs, but clearly had potential academically, but then left school and played full-time table tennis and picked off A-levels, 1 A-level per year for 3 years, and got grade A's, and then went off to Oxford University, Balliol College, and got a first-class honours degree at Oxford in politics, philosophy and economics. And I think that was not necessarily visionary of me as the coach, of the England coach at the time, but of his father and Matthew working together and just planning that career. So Matthew then ends up going to Oxford, 8-week terms, 3 8-week terms in a year, so he could still play his table tennis, pursue his career, pursue his degree. Matthew did really well as a table tennis player, but had a great career. He built up the qualifications for a great career after his table tennis. So again, I just think that's good visionary. John Preen was the visionary for Carl Preen, and Carl had this good fortune, I guess, that he had a German passport because his mother was German. So he had a German passport, so he could play in the Bundesliga, and each team in the Bundesliga were allowed 1 overseas player. Well, Carl could play as a German player because he had a German passport. So Carl Preen could play in a team with a Chinese player. So Carl Sunday became quite a unique product. And John Preen just managed that superbly for Carl, and he capitalized on that. And he was, a really, obviously one of the best players in Europe. And I thought that was a great bit of vision, backed by a parent there to maximize the opportunities of a great player who had the advantage of, the German passport. and capitalise that on the system that currently was in place in Germany. So yeah, I think all are important. I think when they're younger, the taxi driver is massive because they've got to get around. And table tennis is hard. You know, I was the taxi driver for Katie, and it's not like football where you go Saturday morning at 10 o'clock and you're back home at 12 o'clock after half an hour each way. You go, you know, you leave Friday night and sometimes you're not back till late on Sunday. You know, it's the whole weekend. As a parent, you're away. So the taxi driver bit is very demanding, but so important. And I've seen a few kids, and you know, you have a sponsor across your shirt, and it'll say "sponsored mum and dad," and that is so true, isn't it? That because again, you know, to actually enter a tournament might only be £10, £15, but then the petrol and 2 nights in a hotel and etc. The food when you're away as well. They suddenly can be very costly weekends. So there's so many aspects to it, aren't there? That yeah, no, it's. But I think your visionary one is particularly important.
Yeah, well, it is. Yeah, it is. You know, I think if you show the children the road and say, if you want to go down that road, then by all means go down it. But as long as they know all the choices, and then they can make an informed choice. Lisa, you've been on form again tonight yourself. Any more from you or any more from YouTube?
Nothing from YouTube. I have a question. You mentioned that you found it was quite important for children to think by themselves during a match and be able to kind of come up with tactics against their opponent. How was your experience with your children? Did you find that they were quite dependent on your presence being there at the match, or did they kind of take it on themselves to coach themselves?
It's a good question. I think they took it upon them. You know, Katie was the one really, because Adam sort of faded away from table tennis and followed other sports at the age of about 12. No, I'd like to think that Katie was beginning to think for herself at the age of 13, 14, 15, and it didn't matter who coached her at that point in time. And equally, when she was playing, she wasn't looking for me. You know, if I was sat at the back of the arena or somewhere, she wasn't looking, where's mum, where's dad? You know, she would then be focused on a game, think about a game, sometimes get it wrong. And of course, Katie ended up at the age of about being a defender. And I think when you're a defensive player, the tactics are really important. You know, you've got to know when to attack, when to float, when to use backspin. And I think she did it pretty well. I mean, Jill's the defender. I mean,
I thought she did it really well, but I think it's also important when you're a parent and a coach to keep asking questions to the player. You know, what do you think about what do you think you went wrong? How did you win your points? Where did you think you lose your points? Instead of just telling them all the time, so then they're having to think about it. I think that's very important, not only as a parent but as a coach. And I think we always sort of spoke to Katie in that way, asking her questions instead of just telling her what the answers are. And then, you know, when a player goes and plays, then they can all that experience that they've had and learned, you know, that they can think for themselves then.
I commentated at the Asian Games last year, and they were in Indonesia. And it's the best Chinese are there. It's a big event. And India now, I don't know if, you know, people are following India, but India are doing really well. India have got a world-class men's team and a world-class women's team. And one of their best player, probably their best woman, Batra, she plays an unusual, she plays a little bit like Carl Cream, funny enough. And Massimo Constantini, who it's not a very Indian name, is it? Massimo Constantini. He was a good friend of mine, played for Italy, but he was the coach of the Indian team until recently. He now is director of coaching for the ITTF. So he was there in Indonesia, and it was the quarterfinal of the women's singles, and then they put on the quarterfinal of the men's singles, and the number one Indian man was playing in the quarterfinal of the men's singles. And Constantini made the decision. How he'd handled it, I don't know, but he then went to sit with the man, and another coach stepped in. And I could see, I'm commentating on this game, And even at that level, she's looking over to Constantini, you know, who's 3 tables away. And I'm not saying it cost her the game. She was playing a very good Chinese player, but it definitely didn't help her. And I just thought to myself, you know, if I'd have been, if I'd have been her parent, you know, watching that to me was, even at that level, that cost her points. Not saying it cost her the match or it cost her, but it definitely cost her points. Her focus wasn't on, she wasn't in the zone on the table. She's looking over here. And I was really surprised to see that at a high level. So it's prevalent at all levels, this dependence.
Yeah. You would have thought that, again, as part of a player's education, the good coach would say, if I say Lindsay Muir to Colin Dalglish, she'll say, you're on Scotland duty, listen to the Scottish coach. You know, or you're on England duty, I'm 10 rows in the back, I don't want you looking at me at all. He's the person. And if he's talking a load of rubbish, then don't do it. And if he's giving you good advice, then carry it out. Really, it's as simple as that, really, isn't it?
It is. And I must say, when I was the coach to the England team, I was really lucky. I had some great players that you know had come through the system, not through me at all. I just was very lucky to inherit them. But the best player probably, the best player was Desmond Douglas. And, you know, coaching Des was an absolute dream. Coach him in the training hall, and he would just practice for hours. And when the session finished, he'd often ask, could he practice a bit longer? So all the other players thought, well, you know, we should practice. And they could. It was just that example. And then when he played, Des was always come over, listen with respect to what I had to say. If I fell asleep in the corner of the table and he came over and saw me asleep, he'd just say, his attitude would have been, oh, Don's shattered. I'll just leave him be. And he would have just carried on. You know, it wouldn't have even worried him. It was that sort of, I hasten to add, I never did fall asleep in the corner. But it's just that, you know, Des, that's how I know Des would have reacted. It would have been, you know, Don's shattered. He's been here for 5 days. I'll leave him be and I'll just carry on. And it wouldn't have affected his performance one iota. And I thought that was, you know, that I think is a good attitude to have.
One of the things that I was told as a young parent, leave books all around the house. So your children will naturally just pick them up, you know, in this room, that room. And I think my advice would be is leave balls and bats and, you know, just around the house. Again, just so people, just when they're 1 and 2. When I go off to my grandchildren now, I'll just roll the ball in the lounge room and I watch my 2-year-old granddaughter sort of fiddle. But, you know, I think they're all sort of important lessons rather than a lot of the children I'm seeing now, Don, at my grandson's school, they can't catch the ball. You know, I'm sort of doing a cricket lesson with them on Friday afternoons after school, and most of them sort of clap and the ball's past them. So again, you know, those basic skills, I really do feel they can be developed at home before they even play sport.
Yeah.
See, I think, Dave, as well, that's one selling point for table tennis, because when you play table tennis in a period of Katie's experience and Adam's experience of table tennis stood them in really good stead for other sports. Just the timing, hand-eye coordination, catching the ball. And I do think table tennis is great. You play tennis, you know, you hit the tennis ball and then it goes over there. And by the time you've got it and you come back, in table tennis, you could have hit the ball 20 times. You know, okay, you're only tapping it over gently, but you're getting timing. And I really do think table tennis, you know, a selling point for it at a young age is it develops those skills, I think, better than any other sport. You know, it's not a coincidence that Adam, you know, we've talked about Adam's cricket career, but, you know, he was pretty good straight away because he's used to the timing, hitting the ball as it's coming over. And there's a lot of good table tennis players who are good cricket players, and cricket players who, you know, when I started playing table tennis, I played in the Bolton League as well. And my first game was against Jackie Bond. Jackie Bond was captain of Lancashire cricket, you know, and I'd just been to watch him play, you know, beat Gloucester in the semi-final of the Gillette Cup in front of 30,000 people. And there he was playing Premier League at Bolton, you know. So I think the what's the word, transfer of skills is enormous from table tennis.
Obviously got strength, speed, movement, anticipation, reaction, and probably the right hostility distance, 9 feet. It's probably got every aspect of every game, you know. And you do find if you can play table tennis, you can just pick up most sports. I think it's a great grounding. And I would also say sport tennis, you know, if I was a parent, a young parent again, I'd have my children playing table tennis, but short tennis with a softball, you know, on a badminton court. I think the two combined, you know, is great. Lisa, I'm going to leave the last question to you. We've basically covered. I've got one more for Don afterwards. But have you got a last question?
It'd probably be back to kind of matches when your children used to play. So see when they were like making mistakes and stuff, how did you manage to remain calm? Or did they feel like pressure to win all the time at all?
Yeah, no, I actually think that when the players, when we're in a competition hall, the best thing that a good coach or parent can do is the body language. And it's not about whether the player wins or loses the point. We all know, you know, when the ball's mid-table and, you know, the bounce is reasonably high, then if you're an attacking player, you attack that ball. You don't push that ball back if you want to become. Now, sometimes you can push that ball back and win the point because you're playing at under 10s, and I would tend not to discourage that, but I wouldn't reinforce it. If they went to attack that ball and missed it, then I would sort of say, unlucky, well played, well done, even though they've lost the point. So I think body language is so important from the corner. And I would suggest to some coaches that their body language and the way they, you know, give advice is dependent on whether the point is won or the point is lost. So the playing safe and keeping the ball on the table to win the point, then that, I'm not saying it should be negatively reinforced because they've won the point and, you know, well done. But you've got to develop the right sort of game as well. So I think body language, Elisa, is so important from parents. You know, and it's so difficult that when the child, your son or your daughter, you know, attacks a sitter at, well, it's I was going to say at 20 all, you know, it's 10 all now, isn't it? When it's and they miss it. It's so easy to go, oh my God, what are you doing? Which of course is the worst thing you can do. What you should be doing is saying, well done, unlucky, same again, or whatever it may be. They all sound naive comments, but they are actually encouraging them to do the right thing. But you're right, it needs, and that's why I think the parents' attitude has to be one that I'm a teacher, you know, I'm not a fan here, I'm not, you know, it's not me out there, I'm not, it's you know, it's getting the balance of everything right. And I think that's a real challenge when you're a coach, a parent sat in the corner. And I don't think we could do with more people who can do that, who have those skills to read the game and to know, even though you've lost the point, to say well done and encourage them. So
last week, this is my last question as well. We had Emma Hurley, as I used to know her, and Sue Collier. And they both played table tennis for 40 years. Well, in Emma's case, she hasn't had a break apart from when she's been injured. When you're putting your children into sport, do you think, oh, this is a sport for life? Does that ever cross your mind or not?
Well, funnily enough, I've just started to play again. I'm playing in the Preston League and I'm really enjoying it. Not winning many games. They've stuck me in the Premier League, which is too high a standard for me now. I think it's one of the real benefits. But I think with the youngsters, it's all about, you know, enjoyment, and even making them, you know, you've got to play 4 hours a day. Well, I think they should only play 4 hours a day to training camp if they enjoy it. And if they don't enjoy it, then, you know, really it's you know, yes, keep playing, but just set your level depending upon how much you're prepared to put into it. But yeah, no, I think sport for life is important, and it's a sport you can come back to, as indeed I have. You know, I haven't played a competitive game for 25, 30 years. And then last season, I won 10, lost 20 in the Premier League in Preston. The next league down might have been better for me. But yeah, no, I managed to win 1 in 3. So I was pretty pleased with that, but thoroughly enjoyed it.
So you're playing better than ever?
So,
A different game to what he used to play. He doesn't move around with his forehand on the backhand side because he wouldn't be able to get back. But so he's having to play more closer to the table, aren't you?
If I had to finish with one, you know, I've really enjoyed tonight talking about things, and it makes you think a little bit about what you do. If I had to give one piece of advice to parents or to coaches for that matter, is enjoyment. You know, just it's got to be enjoyable. And the kids then have got to want to do it. You know, they've got to enjoy doing it, and they've got to want to do it. And then, you know, the parents then, as you say, from a coach, taxi driver, facilitator, you know, they all probably have a significant role at different times in the player's career. And I was chatting tonight before we started, and you know, one parent said, "Well, you know, I'm not really that involved now." Well, that parent's been a success because they've then made themselves, you know, the players are independent.
Yeah.
So, you know, I think that's what we're all working towards, players who think for themselves, who still really enjoy it. Then you can, you know,
take that step back.
Take that step back. So don't worry if you're not as involved. You've actually done a great job, and well done.
They say, as a parent, if you can give your children the roots to grow and the wings to fly. And it
sounds good to me, Dave. You always have a good one of those, don't you?
Right, well, can I say a big thank you to Elisa again? And you know, we've gone off on a different angle, looking at the role of parents. So again, Don, it's good to have your angle on it, being a player, being a top player yourself, and good to have Jill in it at the end. That's excellent. And thank you to everybody. And Matt, if you can close us down, and we'll just have a 5-minute wind down. We'll see you all next week at 7:30. Thank you.